All right, for the right, it's going to be me versus false believer. The proposition on the table is God exists. So I just put the argument in the chat, you know what I'm saying, the KG ontological argument that me and Kylie, put blood, sweat, and tears into false believer. What's going to be your contention with the argument? Or if you need any clarity on the terms, we can get that too.
Yeah, so in P2, it assumes that a necessary being could cause these set of contingencies, which is what I'm going to contend to.
You want the motivation for that or no?
I can give my rebuttal, or you can motivate.
Also, explanation here is not being used in terms of causality, so that's already a blunder. Dumb fuck.
Sorry,
look, I can explain how to... Yeah, explanation here is not being used in terms of causality, right? It's going to be in terms of some counterfactual dependence.
Sure, if
right, it doesn't talk about causality. Right, it talks about... What?
What do you think causality is?
Yeah, causality, we can take some model of causality like Aristotelian causality, that's fine. But look, all we're talking about in this argument is going to be some counterfactual dependence.
What does Aristotelian causality posit? Could you catch that the view?
Yeah, I don't see the relevance relation. So can you deal with the argument that I just provided, please? Right, I'm not gonna answer questions about this meta. Right, if it's not relevant to the argument that I provided, we're not gonna get an answer to that game. Yeah, what's the relevance relation?
It's related to my rebuttal. It's related to my rebuttal.
Yeah, can you explicate the relevance relation, please?
I'm saying necessary things or eternal things could possibly not be able to explain the set of all contingencies or the BCCF.
Yeah, what is that responding to?
Yeah, P2.
You want me to motivate the view or no?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so premise 2 says that the set of all contingent states could possibly have some external explanation. Now, you would agree that for anything X, right? Anything X here is just going to be something that exists. There's a dichotomy between contingent and necessary. You would agree to that?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and then we could say something like, look, it's possible that the set of all contingent states has some external explanation, right? You would agree that that's logically possible?
Yeah, sure, but it can be metaphysically impossible, which would mean that it would be false in every single possible world.
Wait, what was your response? Hold on, my audio.
Yeah, it could be metaphysically impossible.
We're talking about logical modality. Don't equivocate, dumb fuck. We're talking about logical modality. Is it logically possible? I didn't ask you about metaphysical.
Yeah, it's logically possible, sure. That doesn't
Perfect. So premise 2 is correct, because premise 2, when it talks about possibility, is indexing it towards logical modality. So you just conceded that premise 2 is in fact true. So then you get conclusion 1, which is that therefore some necessary thing is possible. Perfect. You just conceded.
I didn't concede. Cap, you do realize that necessary things cannot cause. If necessarily P.
Under what modality? Under what modality? Under what modality? Under what modality? Please answer that.
Under what modality? What was the modal term I used?
You said necessary things cannot cause, right? Cannot, there was a modal notion. I'm asking under what modality?
Oh yeah, logically. Logical modality. So if...
So what would be the contradiction? What's the P and not P? Go ahead.
Yeah, necessarily P. If necessarily P causes Q, then Q would be necessary.
Well, where does the argument talk about causality?
Even if it's an explanation, it doesn't matter. I don't get your...
Wait, where does the argument talk about causality? It's not a causal relation. We're talking about counterfactual. It's modal. So where does the argument talk about causality?
I asked you what you meant by causality. Said we could take the Aristotelian view. Then I asked you what...
Yeah, I said the argument doesn't talk about causality, dumb fuck. Look, what premise do you think is talking about causality? And I will explain why that's not the case. So can you answer that?
On P2.
You think P2 is talking about causality in virtue of what?
When I'm looking at P2, I'm seeing it could have some explanation. I'm seeing the explanation. Yeah.
I already explained to you that explanation is not, we're not talking about some causal relation, right? We're talking about some modal counterfactual dependence, right? And where, you know what I'm saying? So we're not talking about causes.
Yeah, I don't understand.
So you're already equivocating.
So when you say that, I don't know if I can, how do I explain? I don't know if I can.
Well, what do you mean by cause?
I don't know what you mean by P. It's your argument. It doesn't matter. I'm looking at your argument.
Look, you made the claim that it is the case that our argument talks about cause. So this is a clarifying question. What do you mean by cause there? Please explain that.
I'm agnostic. I'm not sure if it does.
So then you're not licensed to make the claim. How are you licensed to make the claim that it is the case that our argument talks about causality when you're agnostic to the view? Nigga, you cannot be agnostic and then now say that it is the case. So what are you talking about?
Tell me the Aristotelian. Just tell me what the Aristotelian view posits. If you can't.
What's the relevance relation? You made the look. I'm gonna walk you through what happened, right? You made the claim that it is the case that our argument talks about causality. Then I asked you, well, what is meant by cause there? You said I'm agnostic. So how are you licensed to make the claim that it is the case that our argument talks about causality?
Oh, if I made a claim, then I'll take that back. Then I said.
Oh, so we're gonna walk back the claim, correct?
I don't remember.
So you're walking back the claim you made, right? That's blunder number 2. Appreciate it. So you're walking back that claim. Also, you already agreed, right? You already agree with me that premise 2 is true, right? You already conceded from the onset that the set of all contingent states could logically possibly have some external explanation. You already agreed to that. So we can just go to conclusion 1. Therefore, some necessary thing is possible.
Wait, Cap. If something is metaphysically impossible, even if it's logically possible,
We're not. Stop equivocating on the modality. The argument's not talking about metaphysical modality. The argument's not talking about metaphysical modality. Please explain that.
That doesn't matter. Dude,
am I talking about metaphysical modality in the argument? Yes or no, please.
When you say possibly, no, you're not explicitly saying that, but your argument will still be false.
Yeah, perfect. So what's the relevance relation to the argument?
Yeah, your argument would be false, even if you're talking about logical modality. It would still be.
Okay, what's the P and not P entail from the set of all contingent states having some external explanation then? What's the proposition in this direct negation? Because now you just said it is the case that P2 is false if we're talking about logical modality. So what's the P and not P? If you can't provide that, then you're not licensed to make that claim, and I would expect you to walk back that claim that you just made. So what's the P and not P?
What am I giving a P and not P for? What's the contradiction?
Because you made the claim that it's not going to be the case that it's logically possible that the set of all contingent states has some external explanation. So I'm asking, what's the P and not P? If you can't give me that, then I expect you to walk back that claim, or you're just making some unjustified claim from the onset. So what's the P and not P?
I gave 2 rebuttals, one of which is metaphysical.
Wait, what's the P and not P? Please, can you answer that?
I gave 2 rebuttals, one of which is metaphysical.
What are you responding to? I'm asking you, what's the P and not P? Because you said it's not going to be the case that it's logically possible, which means that it entails some contradiction if this were to be the case. So what's the P and not P?
Sure, P would be, so if a necessary thing caused a contingent thing, the P and not P would be...
I already told you, you don't even know what you mean by cause there. I already told you, you're not licensed to say that my argument talks about causality.
P would be it not being contingent. P being contingent.
I already told you, my argument does not, you're not licensed to say my argument talks about causality. You walked that claim back. Remember, you walked back the claim that my argument talks about causality. So that's going to be blunder number fucking 3, right? So this P and not P is not applicable to the argument that I just provided.
A set of contingent states not being contingent. That's the P and not P. That's what.
Yeah, how is that derived?
Yeah, if you're
I just want to flag this issue. I want to flag. I want to actually flag this issue even more.
A necessary thing is causing a contingent thing. That contingent thing.
What do you mean by cause there? What do you mean by cause there?
However you use it, it's your argument.
I already told you I don't use causality in my argument. The argument doesn't talk about cause. That's blunder number fucking 4. You don't even know what's meant by cause. You're asserting that my argument. Stop talking. Stop. I'm not finished. Stop. I'm not finished. Nobody thinks you will do it now. I'm gonna be honest. That's blunder number fucking 4. You already said you don't even know what's meant by the word cause when you're recapitulating this P and not P.
Wait, can you give like?
You don't even know what's meant by cause. How are you licensed to make the claim?
Wait, can you like tell me what like an explanation is? Like how can? What
Yeah,
do you mean by
an explanation is just going to be some counterfactual dependence relation, in where if this thing does not occur, then if X does not obtain, Y does not obtain.
If X does not obtain, Y does not obtain.
That's what's meant by explanation.
So if the explanation doesn't exist, then the thing being explained wouldn't exist.
Yeah, if the thing doing the explaining doesn't exist, then the thing that's being explained would not exist. That's what's meant by explanation here. So I'm going to ask you again, working under that, stop talking, I'm not finished. Under that definition of necessary, how are you deriving that P and not P? Or is it just no longer applicable? I'm curious.
Give the P and not P. Do you want me to repeat it?
Under this definition of explanation, how are you deriving the P and not P?
Yeah, I was about to show how, for me, that seems just like...
Also, I just want to flag for the rec, this is not going to result in some modal collapse, because nowhere did I say anything about the explanation being entailing. So if you're trying to charge me with some modal collapse, that's just not going to work, because I didn't say it's entailing.
Collapse, by the way, when you're like booking S5.
No, it's not, because I didn't say the explanations are going to be the kinds of things which are entailing, right? You only get modal collapse if the definitions are the kinds of things that are entailing, right? If A entails B and A is necessary, then B is going to be necessary. But we never said X entails Y, right? We said if X doesn't exist, Y doesn't exist. Nowhere does that talk about it being entailing. So you don't actually get modal collapse. So
wait, you don't think this argument? Wait, in the second part of the argument, you don't think there's gonna be a modal collapse when you're talking about BCCF?
Yeah, I just explained why, right? I just explained how.
Yeah,
look, you only get. Look, I'm gonna say this one more time, right? Look, I'm gonna say it one more time. You only get modal collapse if the explanans and the explanandum are the kinds of things which are going to be entailing, right? If A, then necessarily B, right? But that's not baked into my definition of explanation, right? Nowhere in my definition of explanation did I say that it's the kind of thing that's entailing. So how are you getting modal collapse? Also, this isn't even going to be the kind of thing that's a causal relation. So you already walked back that claim, right? You've already made like what 4 or 5 blunders on the board. But I've just contended with you trying to charge me with modal collapse. So what's your response to that?
Yeah, by the way, I'm not talking about cause. When I was talking about something else. Even without.
Yeah, what's your response to what I said about the modal collapse, please?
Okay, we can run it back, but I'm just gonna show how this like.
Look, if you have no response to the critique that I just levied about how you don't in fact get modal collapse, then we can go to closers. That's fine.
Yeah, I was gonna show how it would with another argument.
You would agree that you only get modal collapse if A, then B is necessary, right? You only get modal collapse if that's true, right? But nowhere in my definition of explanation did I say that the explanans entails the explanandum.
Wait, do you think this argument like do you think this argument uses S5? It's yes or no?
No, the argument doesn't use S5. If you think so, we're gonna need the argument for that.
It doesn't use S5.
What's the argument that it does?
Sure, when you see a necessary thing is
This nigga beatboxing, I can't even hear false believer, please. Alright, thank you.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm just curious on look, let's not pivot to S5, right? Because I didn't get a response.
You asked me to motivate something, so I'm giving you the motivation.
Okay, yeah, you can motivate that, and then after we're gonna hop that ass right back into the modal collapse talk. So go ahead and motivate them argument presupposes S5.
I would still like expect you to reply to this, but
go ahead and motivate them argument uses S5.
What? Yeah, the conclusion 1. Therefore, some necessary thing is possible. You're saying a necessary thing is possible. Then you're saying in P3, a necessary thing is either impossible or necessary. They're showing how it's not impossible, so it's gonna be necessary. That's using S5.
Yeah, how does that? You're just question begging. You're question begging. I'm asking you, how is it the case that the argument uses S5? Can you answer that, please? You just restated. Stop talking. I'm not finished. Stop talking. You just stop talking. You just restated the claim that my argument presupposes S5. That's what I'm asking you to motivate. So can you motivate the view that my argument presupposes S5 or no? Because if you can't, then we can go right back into the modal collapse talk, and I can show you how, in fact, my argument does not result in some modal collapse.
Yeah, first of all, S5, one of the rules is possibly necessary, therefore necessary. Do you agree to that?
That's one of the axioms, or that's one of the theorems. But the point is that this argument can work even under a different modal system, right? You can take something like axiom K, you can take something like system K or system T, and the argument would still work, right? You don't need S5 modal system. S5 could not exist, and this argument would still follow.
You do realize that even if the axiom exists within S5 and it exists in weaker systems, it's still using S5. It's still within S5.
No, right? It's not. It's not using the S5 modal system, dumb fuck. But look, I'm just gonna ask you this way: is it logically possible that my argument follows if S5 modal system doesn't exist? Is that logically possible?
Wait, sorry, repeat the question.
Is it logically possible that my argument goes through if S5 modal system didn't exist? Also, I was already gonna ask that before Kylo typed it.
Yeah, if you're using a weaker system, then yeah, sure, but it's still
perfect. So the argument, in fact, does not presuppose S5 modal system. Correct. So now we're going to get back into the modal talk, right? So I'm going to ask you a question. Do you only get modal collapse if the explanation talk is the kind of thing that's going to be entailing? Can you answer that? It's a yes or no.
Can you repeat the question and clarify?
Yeah, so modal collapse is if A entails B and A is necessary, right? Then B is necessary, right? That's modal collapse. That's what critiques of like Leibniz contingency argument want to say, right?
If everything was like that, then yeah.
Perfect. Now you only get this if the relation is the kind of thing that's going to be entailing, correct?
What do you mean?
Yes or no? You only get modal collapse if the kind of relation is going to be the kind of thing that's entailing, right? A would entail B. You only get modal collapse if that's true.
Like a conditional?
Yeah, A entails B. It follows. Yeah. Necessary. Now, I'm going to give you my definition of explain, right? And you're going to tell me whether or not anywhere in this definition it talks about some entailing relation. Are you ready?
Sure.
Now, does anywhere in that talk about entailing? Please. Can you answer that?
Only if X doesn't obtain, Y doesn't obtain.
Does that talk about an entailing relation? Yes or no?
If X did obtain, then Y would obtain, right?
That's irrelevant. I'm asking in my definition of explanation, right? right? Can you answer the question of whether or not that talks anything about entailing? Can you answer that?
I mean, yeah, if X didn't exist, then that would entail that Y wouldn't exist.
Yeah, but does that talk about some relation in where if X exists, it necessarily entails Y? Is that what that says or no? Is it logically possible that you have some explanation in where X does not entail Y?
If and
Under
only
my
if,
definition?
yeah, it would be.
Is it logically possible?
Logically possible to be what? For X to obtain, but Y doesn't obtain? What are you asking?
No, I'm asking, can you have some situation in where X explains Y, right, and X does not entail Y under this definition?
No.
Is that logically possible? Oh, what's the contradiction?
Well, it's an if and only if. That just seems like a biconditional. It's the exact same.
What?
Did obtain, then Y would obtain.
The if and only if is talking about, this is just a schema to talk about what is and what counts as an explanation. Now I'm asking, if we have X explains Y, right, is it logically possible that X does not entail Y? Can you answer that?
Test.
Yeah, that's different from what you typed. Here you typed if and only if. That's different.
I typed if and only if in the first one. I just copy and pasted it.
So the question you're asking is different. The question now
I'm asking, is it logically possible that X explains Y and does not entail Y? Is that logically possible?
Sure.
If you can't answer that, oh, so then you don't actually get modal collapse because it's not the kind of thing that's entailing, and you already agreed that you only get modal collapse if the explanation talk is the kind of thing that's entailing. You just conceded again. Let's go. That's problem number 6. Oh my god! I just solved the modal collapse critique. How are you going to respond to that?
Wait, slow down. Repeat that.
You said earlier in the dialectic that you only get modal collapse if the explanation talk is the kinds of thing that's entailing, right? And now you're saying if X explains Y, it doesn't entail Y, so you don't actually get modal collapse because you can have some necessary thing that explains the set of all contingent things and have the contingent things still be contingent. So you just conceded on the modal collapse point as well. This is like border number 6 or 7. 6, 7.
But an explanation, okay, yeah, but an explanation doesn't. The way
So you agree that you don't actually look. You agree that you don't actually get modal collapse, right?
What?
You agree that you don't actually get modal collapse, right? Because you said you only get modal collapse if it's entailing. And now you said it's logically possible that you can have some explanation where it's not entailing. So you agree that you don't get modal collapse, right?
But the instance you gave.
Yes or no? Yes or no? Retard. Answer that. You agree that you don't get modal collapse? Perfect. So what's your critique with the let's get another critique of the argument on the board because both of your critiques actually didn't work. So do you have another critique? And if not, we can go to closers.
I guess I would have more critiques, but I just don't understand how it would be modal collapse because wouldn't be modal collapse because the way you're using.
I just walked you through it. Or you just low tier that you don't understand that I just solved the modal collapse under your own semantics. You said you only get modal collapse if explanations are the kinds of things that are entailing. Then you agreed that under my definition of explanation, it's not entailing. So it would be the case that you don't actually get modal collapse. How are you just low tier? So you don't get. Okay, so do you have another critique to the argument?
Let's see. I guess in P2. Wait, let me scroll up. I guess in P2, if the set was brute, then it could have an external explanation. The explanation could it be necessary?
That's fine. We're not talking about what is the case, right? This is all modal, right? The set being brute is fine, right? The set being brute in reality, that's fine, right? That doesn't actually affect P2 because we're talking about the possibility space. So I don't understand why you're bringing these synthetic facts in when the argument is all analytic.
If the set was
you agree. Hold on. Let me just ask you.
Right? Wait.
Let me just ask you this way, right? Hold on, chill. Let me just ask you this way. Can the set be brute and it still be possible that it has an explanation?
No. Cannot.
How? What's the P and not P?
Yeah, a brute. It's analytic. A brute thing doesn't have an explanation, so it would have an external explanation. If it did have an external explanation, then it would be brute.
What? Not having doesn't mean you can't. We're talking about possibility.
If it was already to be the case that it was brute, then it would be impossible for it to have an external explanation, right?
No.
Do you agree to that? No? You don't think
We're
so?
talking about the possibility space.
Do you think
right?
something
just because it is the case, you understand, right? Just because it is the case that X does not mean it's impossible for there to be some contrastive way it could have been. right? Like, you would agree that it is the case, right, that my phone is on my desk right now, right? But it could be possible, right, that it's not on my desk, right? Just because something is the case, it doesn't mean that it's impossible for it to be different.
Then it wouldn't be brute.
What?
Then the
How?
universe.
How does that follow?
It could have an explanation. Then it would be brute.
I'm saying it can be brute and possibly have an explanation.
It can be brute and possibly have an explanation.
Yes.
Then it wouldn't be brute in the first place.
No, it would still be brute in reality. Right? It possibly having some explanation is going to be some analytic. Stop. It possibly having some explanation is going to be some analytic fact, right? But it being brute in reality is a synthetic fact. You're making a category error between analytic and synthetic.
So it would be possible for something brute to have an external explanation.
Mm-hmm.
That just.
I'm not gonna lie. We could go to closers. You're getting beat the fuck up. I'm sorry. This is bad.
I think so. I think you're a little confused, but that was a good debate.
Yeah, I can give my closing statement and you could give one. Obviously the audience who's watching this, we all just seen this nigga get beat the fuck up. He got beat the fuck up on both of his critiques, the premise 2 of the argument. He granted me premise 2 of the argument, right? He tried to charge me with modal collapse, and I explained to him how you don't actually get modal collapse, where I had to walk this nigga through it like walking a dog on a leash down the street. He's actually low tiered. I don't want this nigga to ever pipe up trying to debate nobody ever again after this. But yeah, you can give your closer, low tier.
Yeah, I wasn't even trying to debate that guy. I was trying to debate Kylo, but sadly the judge had to leave, so we had to force conclude. But that's fine. All right,
Vale, give your verdict.
Conclude.
Capp won.